is the Field of 68 After Dark on this Thursday night, December the 2nd, 2021. I am John Fanta. He is Sean Paul with us tonight, Mr. Mid-Major, with tons of news and notes throughout the next hour, and then doing great work with Heat Check. Eli Boettger is with us as well. Big show on the docket, folks. We'll give you our consensus top 5 players in America up to this point in the season. We'll talk about top conferences as well. Biggest surprises, the biggest disappointments, and a look ahead to the weekend. Plus, we welcome in Norfolk State head coach Robert Jones, as he has led Norfolk State to a 9-1 start to the season. That is best by a MEAC school ever. So that's coming up. Let's get the night started here, gentlemen. We've started the month of December. Sean, give me the biggest headline in college basketball that you are paying attention to right now.
You know, I would actually mention 2 things here. The 2 Iowa schools are really standing out, both of them. They've both been very impressive. I didn't think either were NCAA tournament teams heading into the year, but Iowa beat Virginia on the road the other day. They had beat every team they played up to that point by 24 or more, but they were all home bye games. So how much stock do you put into that? Keegan Murray has been one of the best players in college basketball this season, but replacing what they lost, Luka Garza, Joe Wieskamp, CJ Frederick, that's not easy to do, but Keegan and Chris Murray, Keegan's twin brother, have both really stood out this season. Jordan Bohannon's there, and at Iowa State, they look like an NCAA tournament caliber team to this point too. They were picked last in the Big 12, but Tyrese Hunter looks like a future NBA player. Gabe Kalsher has looked really good. Isaiah Brockington. So TJ Otzelberger's done a great job mixing in his young guys with veterans from the transfer portal. Both Iowa teams have been really impressive.
Eli, give me your biggest headline that you're paying attention to right now.
I think one of the main things that we've seen so far this season, now that it is more of a capacity crowd aspect in college basketball, is just the variety of upsets that we've seen. I think last time was a really good example. BYU going on the road against Utah Valley and being stunned with all the hype that the Cougars have rightfully deserved to this point in the season. But we had a stretch of at least 7 or 8 days where there was at least one top 25 upset against an unranked team. And that wasn't necessarily the case last season. And I do think home crowds are playing a big role there. And there are going to be a number of teams that suffer some of these Q2, Q3, possibly even Q4 losses, if not scares in non-conference play. And we know just how big of a deal that is come Selection Sunday. So I think there are some landmines out there. There have been a lot of bye games that have been closer than expected. Several conferences from the mid and low major ranks that have performed pretty well and admirably to this point in the season. So that's one of the main things that I've seen, and we've seen it just about every single night. There's been a scare or two.
My headline goes out to Mackey Arena. The year of the Boilers. That is the situation for Purdue. It is all in front of them to make that highly sought-after Final Four for this program, to break through in the Matt Painter era. They've had good enough teams to do that. They have a team that is head and shoulders even above those teams with the group that the Boilermakers possess. The fact that you have 2 trees inside in Zach Edey and Travion Williams, who play the game in different ways, but are able to have success and coexist. The fact that you are able to have a sacrifice made by Travion Williams coming in off the bench says a lot. The fact that you have an NBA lottery pick on your team, something that we don't always think Purdue basketball lottery pick. That is what Jaden Ivey is. He is absolutely sensational, and we'll unveil our top 5 consensus players in a little bit here on Field of 68 After Dark. You have 4 different guys that could, at any point, hit 3 or 4 3-pointers in a game. And if you start hitting perimeter shots, it's over. It's curtains. And this team's more than capable of doing it. This is Purdue's best opportunity to win a national championship under Matt Painter. It is there for the taking, and it is clear that Michigan and Illinois are not as good as we thought that they would be. That doesn't mean that those 2 teams couldn't get it right, but Purdue's already got it right. And they're not a very good team. They're not even a great team. They are a historic group, potentially on the offensive end of the floor. we could talk about this Purdue team as being one of the all-time great offensive teams in the history of college basketball.
I think that's fair for sure. I mean, you just look at the different gears Jaden Ivey can switch to. We saw that in the Hall of Fame Classic games, the MTE. There was points where he just turned the game. He turned the game sideways just by himself, being able to make big plays, getting into the paint, finding shooters, creating for himself. I feel like that's something we didn't see a lot by him last year. He wasn't the big time creator for other people, but I feel like that's really what's going to boost his NBA stock too. That he's able to make plays for himself and for others.
I just think with the way that this Purdue team is set up, there are so many different ways that they can beat you, and it doesn't require 3 or 4 guys to all be playing on their A game every single night, because it might be Edie's night, it might be Travion coming off the bench and hitting 20 and 10, Sasha Stefanovic, which is typically the 4th or 5th guy that you mentioned on this Purdue roster. He can hit 4 or 5 threes in a single half, and it's just a roster that is so dynamic in the sense of the ways that they can beat you offensively. And Matt Painter always does a good job with the defensive side as well. So I don't think there are many concerns in that sense, but it's just such an elite offense. It can be beaten in so many ways. And Caleb Furst is another guy who's stepped up. And I don't think the expectations were that high with Travion and Edie coming back that Furst would be a role player, if not a starter. And he's done just that. And it's been an overpowering offense thus far.
All right, tonight on the show, we talk about our biggest surprises here. Biggest surprise for you, Eli?
I think for me, it's Arizona. I think with Tommy Lloyd coming over from Gonzaga and the way that he's picked up this roster and done just such a wonderful job with it has been especially impressive to go from an Arizona team that has missed the NCAA tournament a handful of these past few years to now in year 1 under Lloyd being seen as a national title contender. And I think that's rightfully so with how efficient they've been on both ends. And I think for me, this is such an unselfish team, the way that Kirk Risa has led from the point. His assist rate is off the charts. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Arizona leads the entire nation in assist rate. We know that how they spread the ball around. And it's especially impressive because of this team's height. I mean, everyone in the lineup is 6'3", 6'4", 6'7". Christian Coloco's down at 7 feet, 7'1". So they're not only imposing in their size, but just the way that they just play the game and defensively leading the nation in effective field goal percentage defense. To have that type of balance on both ends, that is a very scary combination. I think Tommy Lloyd, just with his repertoire and his background with some of these international guys, the fit has just been like a puzzle piece. He's just done a wonderful job with this program.
Well, and they're 13th in Ken Pom adjusted defensive efficiency. The fact that length translates to their ability to guard and guard well. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you have length. That doesn't mean that you're a great defensive team. There's a difference there. And I think for Arizona, what we're seeing with Tommy Lloyd, guys, is you're seeing first off, the talent that he was left with at Arizona. Look, there's been no denial that Sean Miller was bringing in high-level talent, that the Wildcats have that talent. What Tommy Lloyd's done is he's kind of put a spin on it that I really like, Sean, and I think Arizona will only get more confident in, let's face it, a weaker Pac-12. That to me, sometimes if you're beating up each other all during your league, there are times when in March you're not as good as you could be because you've had to go through that gauntlet. Arizona has a chance here to be right there as number 2 in the Pac-12. And with the way that they defend, they're going to win a lot of games solely off that, because the Pac-12 also is extremely limited offensively. Some of these teams really are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no question. And I was big on Arizona coming into the season. I liked them quite a bit. I had them ranked. But one of the big reasons was because they have legitimate NBA prospects. Azuolas Tubelis, Benedict Mathurin could be a lottery pick. Those are NBA guys. But I didn't even take into account Christian Coloco making the jump he's made. I mean, he always had the potential, but I didn't think he'd be a 16-point per game, 8 rebound per game, 3 block per game guy this season. I mean, it's obvious just watching him this year compared to last year. He just has so much better feel for the game. He's making shots inside. He's always been a really good defender. He's athletic. He's long. He does everything you want from a big man, and he's starting to generate some NBA draft buzz too. So there's just a ton of talent on this Arizona team. All of their guys can defend. Dalen Terry's pretty good unsung hero for this team. He's not going to be the best scorer. He's not going to average double figures, but he can defend 1 through 4, and he's going to put really good effort on the defensive end.
Yeah, unfortunate to see Arizona's Pac-12 opener against Washington get postponed due to the COVID issues with that one. They will take on Oregon State at Oregon State on Sunday, not the same Oregon State Beavers that made that incredible NCAA tournament run. Sean, you brought up Iowa State as your biggest surprise, and you explained why. So I'm actually going to shift things here to you, Sean Paul. The biggest disappointment in your mind?
I'm going to stick in the Pac-12 here and go with Oregon. They just haven't looked that impressive. The offense doesn't look like it's flowing at all, and I think Dana Altman will get it together. I think they'll get things rolling, but they just don't have great depth, and the transfers haven't been all that good. Quincy Guerrier is a guy I thought could have been first-team all-conference, but he's really struggled this season. Davion Harmon's efficiency numbers aren't great. Will Richardson started getting it going again last game, but I thought he could be a Conference Player of the Year kind of contender, and he just hasn't been that guy. So the players just that I thought could take that jump haven't really taken that jump this season. I think they'll get it going near Pac-12 play. I think things will start to figure themselves out because the talent's there, the coaching's there, so I do believe they'll still be an NCAA tournament caliber team, but they haven't looked that way so far. But thankfully for them, they haven't taken any bad losses on their resume yet, so that's kind of keeping them afloat in the NCAA tournament conversation. Maybe they're a bubble team right now, but not suffering any bye-game losses currently will benefit them come March.
Sure. Here's my biggest disappointment. It's Michigan. I mean, last night to just get railroaded by North Carolina, a North Carolina team that is good, probably second best in the ACC. I think we would agree on that. But guys, to only score 51 points against North Carolina, the offensive issues for Michigan last night were offensive. I mean, they got blown off the floor. And what I look at with this team is I think a lot of people thought that Devontae Jones would be able to come into this program and actually be an upgrade from Mike Smith. That has not been the case. In fact, I think Michigan would take Mike Smith back in a heartbeat right now. Moussa Diabate is going to be an extremely talented player. Like his raw talent, his athleticism, his explosiveness, it's there. And last night he leads them in scoring. But what is wrong with Hunter Dickinson right now? He to have an off night against North Carolina, like Hunter Dickinson should never only score 4 points in a game. That should never happen. They just look out of sync, and they look like a team that offensively is trying to figure itself out because, frankly, they're not getting enough on the perimeter from guys outside of Eli Brooks.
Caleb. No, you go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to say, I thought the opening night matchup against Buffalo was almost a good summation of where Michigan is at as a team, because we saw the Wolverines go up around 18 or 20 points in that game. We also saw them give up a lead where Buffalo clinged to, I think, within a 4 or 5 point deficit. Yeah. And national title contenders just don't do that. When they have a chance to put teams away, they're able to put teams away. And I agree with you. I think the offense comes in spurts, which is not something that you want. I love Diabate. I think he's going to be an absolute star, and I think he could be even featured more in this offense. But as you said, a player of Hunter Dickinson's caliber should be consistently finishing in double figures as he was as a freshman. And I just think there are issues that present themselves at the point guard position. And that was one of the main questions heading in. And it was the same thing as last season as well, with Mike Smith making the jump from a mid-major up to Michigan. And the same case applied to Devontae Jones, who's not making that jump. And I think this team is going to be just fine, but I do think it's a fair assessment to say they've been a disappointment so far.
Who's the second best team in the Big Ten? Sean?
For me, I'm going to go Indiana. I know they lost the other day.
Wow.
But I like Indiana a lot. I mean, that they did lose at Syracuse, so that could change my thoughts a little bit, but I think they're fine. Trace Jackson Davis is playing like one of the best players in the country, 43 points the other day against Marshall. He just looked dominant all season, almost a 70% field goal percentage. He's just looked so improved this year. And the biggest thing for Indiana with me is they've really struggled shooting the three ball the past few years. Parker Stewart, Miller Kopp, Xavier Johnson, those three transfer additions, they have Indiana shooting 37% from outside this year. The improved three-point shooting paired with how good Trace Jackson Davis has been, they have to limit the turnovers a little bit, but they have potential to go really far in the NCAA tournament.
All right, we will get back to that question in a little bit, but we are going to welcome in our guest tonight, and he has led Norfolk State University to some history. It is great to be joined by the head coach of Norfolk State. Robert Jones is with us tonight. Last year, this school winning an NCAA tournament game over Appalachian State. And this season, they've started the year 9-1. It's the best start to a season by a MEAC team in the conference's history. Robert, thanks for taking the time to join us this evening.
Hey, how you doing? Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's great to have you. The 9-1 start, 6 wins over Division I teams. What is it about your group that has allowed you to achieve success?
Well, I think the biggest thing with us is that we have some good versatility. We have some good size, so we can play big, we can play small, and we've really been playing some defense. Even at sometimes I feel like that we're not playing a lick of defense. I guess the numbers say otherwise. If they were 12th in the country with field goal percentage defense right now, and we got some other good defensive categories that we rank pretty high at. But it's been an amazing run so far. We did lose 4 starters from last year, so to start off 9-1 has been tremendous for this group.
In losing the 4 starters, Coach, what do you think has allowed this team to gain that camaraderie and still be able to tighten things up and maintain this level of play despite the roster turnover?
Well, I think that we were able to put together, some good recruits, and they're all buying in. And the funny thing is, I've said this before to the team that I still don't think that we're 100% bought in. I think that it's still like probably 90%, bought in. There's still, you always got a couple guys that are still on the fence, and you got to get them to reel them in. But I tell them all the time too is like, if you can't buy in with 9-1, then I don't know when you're gonna buy in. So, either going to buy in or buy out, I guess. But, I think that once we get to that 100% point, which I think we will, very shortly, I think that we'll be even a better team. And honestly, we haven't got a chance to practice. I mean, we played 10 games so far since the season started. I think I know we have the most Division I, most wins, at 9 of anybody in the country currently. But, we did play a lot of games so far too, with another one Saturday.
Coach, so you were on staff for the 2012 Norfolk State NCAA tournament win over Missouri, but now as the head coach, you made the tournament again last year. Like John Fanta said, you won in the first 4 against App State. What's the difference between being an assistant on the 2012 team and being the head coach on the 2021 team?
The 2021 teams feel like it's more of, your accomplishment. I think as an assistant, you do feel a sense of accomplishment because, you probably recruited some of the guys. You have a great connection with those guys and things like that. But at the same time, the name on that 2012 team is Coach Anthony Evans, but the 2021 team is Robert Jones. So, you definitely feel a different sense of accomplishment by getting the team back to the tournament under your leadership totally. So I do feel like it was definitely a greater sense of accomplishment, and hopefully we can do it again in this year.
Robert, let's go beyond basketball a little bit.
Okay.
Talking about your journey. At one point, you were doing bookings, assisting with that for 50 Cent?
Yeah, I was.
Tell us about it.
Back in 2002, 2003, 2002 to 2005, I was working with Mike Lighty from Violator Management, who was his management company at that time. And I used to help set up college tours and things like that for 50 Cent and the whole, his whole crew, his whole hip-hop crew, G-Unit at the time. So I did that for about 3 years and then still dibbled and dabbled a little bit after that, but really 3 years solid that I did that. And then, like I said, here and there, I would still help out when needed. But I was in charge of the concerts at my school, SUNY New Paltz. So, I met those guys through that. And it just turned into like entrepreneurship and, being a subcontractor, working with 50 and the rest of the G-Unit crew.
Do you have a great 50 story?
Oh, man. It's a lot of stories with when that crew. That was when they were at the hottest. I'm saying some stories I know I can't share on air right now, but there was a man, trying to think of the best one. I remember when it was like a Rock the Mic tour, I think it was called, sure. When and Jay-Z was a headliner, but 50 Cent was so hot at the time that it was Jay-Z's tour, but people would leave after 50 Cent got on it, and 50 used to always be like, that I'm the man, and stuff like that. So and then this is Jay-Z, probably the biggest rapper in the world, but at that time he wasn't the biggest rapper in the world at that time. It was definitely 50 Cent. So it's amazing to see what 50 has done, transitioning out of music into now TV with Stars and all his series and things like that. So I guess we both kind of transitioned out of music a little bit now into different things. I'm just doing, basketball.
What would you say led to that transition from working in that sort of concert venue arena to now working in basketball arenas? Is there something that clicked or something that inspired you to try a new career path?
Actually, my son. My son was born in 2007. So even though I worked, kind of exclusively with Violator Management and G Unit 2002 to 2005, I was still doing my own concerts and basically a party promoter at that time, and also a high school basketball coach at St. Mary's High School. But being in that field, when you're not the entertainer, you're not the super rich person. You get 10% of the booking fees, or if you do a show, you get ticket sales and things like that. It was kind of up and down. Some months you might make a lot of money, and some months, if there was no tour dates, you wouldn't make anything. So I kind of rolled the dice when my son was born, and realized that I needed a more stable income. And I always said I wanted to be either in sports or entertainment. And I've been fortunate enough to be in both. So Anthony Evans, he got the job here. He actually was my assistant coach at SUNY New Paltz. He coached me at SUNY New Paltz. So when he got the job at Norfolk as the interim, he asked me to come down and be on the staff. And once again, rolling the dice, because interim year, anything can go wrong with an interim year. Anything can go wrong. So I'm transporting basically a newborn from New York City down to Virginia, a foreign land, and having it all work out, and we had great success under him, and then he was able to move on to FIU and things like that, and then I was elevated, and now ever since I've been the basketball coach at Norfolk State University.
You guys won 2 games in the Chris Paul HBCU tip-off. What was that whole experience like for you and the team to play in that kind of event? It's the first one that he's done, so you guys got to first look at it.
It was a great experience. I think that these guys strive to be on that level, NBA level, and for them to basically get NBA treatment for a weekend, because everything was laid out. I mean, the meals were probably a little better than what we normally would eat, and things like that. The hotel was nice. The locker room was way different than any college locker room that we've been in. I mean, it was a locker room suite, with everything in there. So if we play some, obviously, high majors and things like that, we never get a visit a locker room like that. So, it was just tremendous for the guys, and just to play in the NBA arena for the guys. I think the whole experience, and of course, having a future Hall of Famer talk to them and be around. And he actually sat on the sideline next to our team. So you're getting in and out the game, you pass to the Hall of Famer, he might throw a couple words at you and things like that. So I think the experience is going to be invaluable. And of course, playing 2 games on national TV, you get a chance to showcase what many might not see and might not understand. And now the whole world gets a chance to see. Like even our kid, Chris Bankston, we had a couple NBA teams now reach out, about him because of his performance. And, I think that he is an NBA player. I think that, he's the next Kyle O'Quinn from our school if he keeps his mind straight and keeps developing. But the whole world got a chance to see that he could be the next Kyle O'Quinn from Norfolk State. So that was tremendous. I mean, that's invaluable right there.
Really,
sorry,
really is, Robert. And I think I just love that event was put on. And I feel like it's a step. I feel like there's a lot of steps that need to still be taken. I was talking earlier this week with Ed Cooley, the head coach at Providence College, about Black coaches. Mm-hmm. And the fact that Black coaches have not been given the respect, the reward that white coaches have always been given in the history of college basketball. And he's tried to do a lot of work with the NABC, just raising awareness, raising what can we do to take steps forward. So as a head coach at an HBCU, as a head coach in the MEAC, what's your message to college basketball and to people out there about what needs to happen for progress to continue?
I think awareness. I think, an event like Chris Paul, when we're on national TV, something like this, when we're on a national forum, a lot of times people say they don't know who the HBCU coaches are or things like that, but we don't get invited to things like this. We don't get invited to national TV. So if we get invited more and included more, then everyone would know, will know who we are, and they'll know our players and things like that. And, the thing I say is that we play a good brand of basketball. It's not just, HBCU, whatever the hell that's supposed to mean, basketball. We play a good brand of basketball. Even, I guess the most valuable mid-major poll that's out there, College Insider, we're number 23 in the country, at 9-1. So we're just as good as any mid-major, across the country, and people need to see that and understand that. And the thing too, I say, is that, I know last year there was a hiring cycle of a lot of African-American coaches and things like that. But the thing I say, there was no HBCU coaches hired, so there's like almost like a triple standard. There's like a double standard of kind of being an African-American coach. And then there's a triple standard of being an African-American HBCU coach. But I think that, even this year, I'll speak for my program, we beat 6 conferences, so far. So we can play and we can coach with any conference in the country. And hopefully people will get a chance to see that, understand that. And, hopefully there'll be more opportunities for HBCU coaches. And I think a lot of times HBCU coaches, I think it's a myth that every HBCU coach is not trying to leave, anything like that. But I do think that it should be more of an opportunity, out there for people to make a decision whether they want to stay or leave. And I think that's what has to change.
Coach, on the same token, with HBCUs, both of the conferences, the MEAC and SWAC, won NCAA tournament games this past year for the first time ever. What was this experience like for you and your program, getting to the NCAA tournament, playing in front of the big lights and winning games? What was that experience like for you for the first time, and what did your players take away from that experience?
It was amazing. Honestly, it was NCAA is the pinnacle of college basketball. Whether it's the first 4 or the last 4, whatever you want to call it, you played an NCAA tournament game and you won the game. And that's what we were able to do, this Appalachian State. It was probably a little stickier than what we wanted it to be. But, we won that game, and then we were able to advance. We were able to advance our name into the next, part of the bracket. And that's what you want to do, survive and advance in March. So that's an experience that's going to be invaluable. We did a team meeting earlier this year, and we asked them about what's, some of their lifelong memory, like their greatest moment in their lives and their worst moment too, And for many of those kids, the greatest moment of their life was the NCAA tournament. So that's, and it's amazing because, I'm obviously older than those guys. So I'm thinking like NCAA tournament is a huge moment, but, the birth of my son and things like that is like moments that are probably a little bigger than NCAA tournament for me. But for those young guys who are 21 years old, they haven't been through a lot of life. So like NCAA tournament is the biggest thing that they've, achieved or accomplished in life for many of those kids. So just to get there, to win a game and to move on and stay a little longer, and things like that, that was tremendous. I mean, it felt like 2012 again, even though 2012 was a whole different dynamic with us beating Missouri and, that being a huge, huge upset and all that stuff like that. It still was a lot of fanfare behind us even beating Appalachian State, honestly. So it was cool. And I think once you drink from that cup, you want to keep drinking from that cup as much as possible.
Yeah, you guys beating Missouri in 2012. Was there like a feeling going into that game after shoot around, into warm-ups, where you guys like, okay, we can do this? Was that the feeling that you guys had going into that game as big-time underdogs? I mean, when you're a 15 seed like that, not many people expect you to win.
Well, the thing that I say with that is that I was the associate head coach at the time, obviously, and I told Coach Evans that I wanted that scout, no matter who we played. I wanted that scout. And people don't believe me. Only people who are in the program truly know. From the moment we were selected on selection Sunday, I said we were going to win that game. It was no doubt in my mind that we were going to win that game, because the thing was, I felt like Missouri couldn't match up with us. I mean, they had 4 guards and an undersized big in Ricardo Ratliff. With Kyle O'Quinn, I knew we were going to have the best player on the floor at all times. No shout, to Kim English or Denman or those other guys, but I knew Kyle O'Quinn could play. I mean, the rest of the world found out he could play later, but I knew that he was going to be the best player. And then, I mean, we had the advantage down low all game. You know, it was they never double teamed, never did anything. And then also their style of play with 4 guards and 1 big kind of bothered the high majors and things like that, because you know you're not used to the 6'10", 7 feet guys running around. So, you know, their 4 guard style bothered high majors. But us, we have played against 4 guards all year, you know, in 1 big. So it was a better quality guard in Missouri, you know, but we have played against that style all year. So the styles, you know, styles make fights. And we knew that this style and our style would clash. I think that we would come out on top, and we did. And as you saw, it's not like we held the ball. We won 86-84. So it wasn't no situation that we're holding the ball, trying to buy possessions. We just played the way we were supposed to play.
Robert, you have brought it up a couple of times in our conversation, being a dad.
Yeah.
What's it like being a working father?
Oh, it's tough. You know, we just came off the road just now. You know, we've been on the road for a week, and you know, you miss your son. I mean, you know, he's a basketball player himself. He's an 8th grader. He's coming up through the ranks. So I missed his first JV game, and you know, I'm going to miss probably the next, I think, 3 games that he's going to play. So you know, that's tough as it is. But you know, hey, you got to do what you got to do. And I think he understands at this point, because he is older. He just turned 14 recently, so he's older. He understands that dad has to do what he has to do, because this is how, you know, the lights stay on, and you know, he gets the sneakers that he wants and things like that. So, you know, yeah, I might miss a couple games, but you know, I'll be there on the back end, and once things settle down, I'll be able to catch pretty much all his games.
Before we let you go, Robert, and it's been great to be joined by Norfolk State head coach Robert Jones tonight on Field of 68 After Dark. You talked about making that move into basketball, leaving the music industry, taking your son with you, and jumping into basketball. To that 20 to 23, 24-year-old kid who might have that dream of working in basketball in some capacity, but they're trying to find their way, what's your biggest piece of advice to them?
I think the biggest piece of advice that I can say is just stay the course. You know, if that's something that you really want to do, just stay the course, because everybody's path is different. Don't keep score with people. It's the same thing I tell my son, even with basketball himself. You know, there might be people that might be better than you right now, but if you stay the course and you keep working, you're going to end up being better than them in the long run. You know, so just stay the course. And my course was different. You know, I was a volunteer assistant at Division III. I coached in high school. I coached AAU. I was assistant coach for 6 years, and then I finally got my break, you know, to be a Division I head coach. Some people play Division I basketball and they get their break right away the next year as soon as they graduate. Some people go to the NBA. As soon as they finish playing the NBA, they get their break right away. So my path was different than a lot of other people. I mean, I had to do music, you know, promote shows and things like that, you know, and stuff. So my path was different than a lot of people, and I think everybody's path is different. So never, you know, say, oh, well, this guy got that job and this guy did that. Everybody's path is different, and you know, whatever God wants you to have, you're going to have. So just stay the course.
From 50 Cent to the Field of 68 last year to 9-1 this season, best start by a MEAC school in the league's history. It's the head coach of the Norfolk State Spartans, Robert Jones. Robert, thank you so much for the time. Good luck here as the year forges on.
Thank you. I appreciate you. Thank you.
We appreciate you. That's Robert Jones, the head coach at Norfolk State. What a start to the season for the Spartans. An amazing story, and we appreciate Coach taking the time. I got to tell you guys, you know, one of the special things about covering this sport is you get to really garner relationships, garner connections. And for that guy right there, you heard him say he was a D3 volunteer. Now he's the head coach of a team that has made history in the MEAC, that could make the NCAA tournament again. I think Robert Jones, buy stock if you haven't already, because this guy's still only getting started, in my humble opinion.
Definitely.
It's really cool to hear the different environments that he's been in throughout his professional career, to being in the small high school arenas or high school gyms, AAU gyms, to being at a 50 Cent show where he's a promoter, to then being back down to the low levels of coaching, and then being back to the NCAA tournament when everyone knows Norfolk State's name. It's pretty inspiring to hear his story and how he's managed to make this all work as a father. It's really cool to see what Norfolk State has accomplished and will continue to accomplish under his lead.
So let's forge on here. We were asked earlier for our consensus top 5 players in college basketball in that National Player of the Year race. And here on After Dark, we're going to bring it to you. Now, Rob Dolster said he was going to take all our suggestions and form a consensus top 5. But we had some rich debate about Drew Timme and Paolo Banchero. We talked about Jaden Ivey in this. There are a couple other candidates that are on the rankings. The best player in the country, Eli, is?
I'm going to have to go Jaden Ivey right now. And it might not be necessarily the popular pick here, but I think all of the preseason hype that he was receiving, I think he's lived up to it, and maybe even then some. And one of the biggest question marks about his game heading into the season was his lack of perimeter shooting. He was extremely inefficient last season. We did see him turn it on the last 5-10 games, and his three-point shooting has gone from around 25% to now above 43%. And that's an enormous leap. That takes you from being undrafted to being a potentially lottery pick. And we've seen that come up quite a bit. He's been such a focal part of the Purdue offense, and you watch him play, and he's athletic. He has this chip on his shoulder, this knack of getting baskets. He's a plus defender as well. And now that he's rounding out his game, he's continuing to develop. I love his upside. I think he's already proven what he's capable of, and will continue to do so. And of course, that's no knock to the other guys on the list, Paolo Banchero, Drew Timme, both extremely worthy candidates. It'll be a fascinating player of the year race, but for my money right now, I'd have to select Jaden Ivey.
Yeah, I'm going with Drew Timme. Preseason National Player of the Year. I don't think he's really done anything to not be the National Player of the Year currently. I guess Banchero and Ivey definitely are in that conversation, but I'm going to stick with Timme for now because I still think Gonzaga is the best team in the country, and Timme could average 20 and 10. I feel like if they're ranked number 1, he's doing that. It would be tough for me not to give it to him.
I'm going to go with Paolo Banchero because when he is fully healthy on the floor in a game, he's the best player on the court in said game. This kid is a game changer in every way. Attacking the rim, flawless. Defensively, NBA level. And he's the closest thing to a professional that we have in the game right now. And so I'm going to place my bet on that. Gonzaga might be the best team in the country. But Drew Timme's a little bit slow-footed. Drew Timme, sometimes just by virtue of the way that he plays, he could actually slow down the pace of the game, and the game is played at his pace. So he might be, sometimes that, it doesn't matter that he's a little slower. He just plays that way, and then you have to play that way. Duke has the head-to-head result over Gonzaga. And the reason why they found an arm's length in that first half, and it was only an arm, I mean, it wasn't much. They were only up by 3 at the break. Paolo Banchero played the half of his life. He put everything on display. It's the best half I've seen by a player this college basketball season, the best single half. He was that good. I think it's close. I think it's great for college basketball. I think if you pick Jaden Ivey or Drew Timme on a given day, this could change. That's a good thing for our sport. That's a good thing for our sport. But man, if you put 10 players in front of me and you put these 3 among them, I'm picking Paolo Banchero as the best player in college basketball. The funny thing is, the best player in college basketball doesn't always win National Player of the Year. Right, Eli? I mean, it's true. Or sometimes, Eli, we get the most hype player doesn't always end up winning the National Player of the Year. I think back a couple years ago, Trae Young mania was in the air, and Jalen Brunson ended up winning the National Player of the Year award.
It's true, and I think a lot of this runs off of, you heard in the college football side, statement performances, statement wins, those types of things, and I think a lot of it falls down to who's in the spotlight and how do they perform in that spotlight, and that generates headlines and that generates our opinions of how we feel about these particular players. But as you said, I think oftentimes if you were to wake up one morning, you'd know who the number 1 player in college basketball is. And right now, I think the fact that we all picked 3 different players, that means it's going to be a pretty fun race here the next handful of months. And I don't think you can go wrong with any of the 3, but I do think in large part it comes down to some of these statement moments. We had Paolo's moment against Gonzaga, and we'll continue to see these other players make their way throughout the season as well.
All right, I'm going to do a fun one here. I'm throwing a total curveball to Sean Paul. Sean Paul, you are going to unveil to us the mid-major player of November. The mid-major player of the month is...
It's a really good question. It's a curveball I wasn't thinking about, so I'm going to have to take a second to think about this. I'm going to go, I'm going to go Jamal Cain from Oakland. Marquette transfer. He's been big time. Oakland has been the best team in the Horizon League and is not even debatable so far. They were picked 6th in the preseason. Cain's averaging 22 a game, 11 rebounds. He's been their best player by a pretty easy margin, and he's looked like one of the best players in mid-major basketball. And that's just an example right there. The high major to mid-major transfer can be just as valuable as a mid-major to high major transfer because there's only 13 scholarship spots on every team. This year's a little different, I guess, with the COVID year and all that, but most times it's...
Wait a minute. What about Fardaws Amac from Utah Valley?
He's up there. He's up there. But what it comes down to, like, you look at Jamal Cain, you look at Kobe McEwen, 2 guys who played real minutes at the Big East level last year. You're familiar with those guys very well. They go down. McEwen's been one of the best players at the mid-major level at Weber State this year. So is Jamal Cain at Oakland.
Yeah.
So we talk about the mid-major guys going up, but how about the high-major guys that end up going down? Because they usually perform pretty well.
I think the one thing to tag along there, which is kind of fascinating, is how I approach some of these transfer portal discussions is a lot of these players who come from high majors who are either at the NIT level or below, say it's a program that's maybe 4 or 5 games below 500 in their respective high major league. If they transfer to a top 2, top 3 team in a mid-major conference, their likelihood of going to the NCAA tournament is actually greater despite playing in a smaller school, and their numbers will probably increase as a result as well. So I think there's a lot of value in some of these players transferring down, so to speak, but also having more opportunity that way.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
It is a great point. And you know what, folks? That's why we're seeing upsets become reality. It's why you're only going to see more Abilene Christian and Oral Roberts stories. Okay, that's what we're in for here. There's no longer as large of a gap in on-paper talent in college basketball. That from the 40th team to even the 120th team, there's not as large of a gap as maybe there once was in this sport. There's truly a parity level. And this year, like Gonzaga and Baylor were so far and away better than everybody last year. If you just look at all different types of numbers they suggested, and then you look at the 2 teams, and it was fitting that they met for the national championship. And if Baylor doesn't go on that COVID pause, we might even be talking about them being even better than like we actually do. But you know what? Like, what I love about this sport right now is that the buy game concept is totally watered down. So much so that there are coaches out there who are like, I don't know if I want to give this school a $90,000 check because guess what? I'm only a 9-point favorite here. And if my team's not hitting perimeter shots, I'm going to lose. And to me, it's not that big of an upset because my team's not playing well right now.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of examples of that, like lower and high major teams that have struggled this year, like Georgia. They lost to Wofford, but Wofford was favored in the game. I mean, like that's pretty interesting to see. And then you look at like UMKC blowing out Missouri. Like, there's been a lot of examples like that this season. Oregon State's lost a handful of them. So some of the high major teams that are near the bottom end of their conference, they're falling to a lot of these mid-major teams this year, and we've seen that quite a lot.
Interesting stuff there on the concept of mid-majors and the gap in college basketball. A couple of scores here tonight that we do want to get into. Utah State up 25-20 on St. Mary's. That game's 90 seconds into the second half. What are we doing? Throw the game back to 1967?
St. Mary's basketball. Gotta love it.
Man, but is there a guy, though, Randy Bennett, what St. Mary's continues to do, the level of consistency that the Gales are able to pull off, I was super impressed with their performance out in Vegas. And I look at them, guys, and I see a couple of really interesting pieces. Tonight it's Alex Dukas, who's a 6'7", kind of a lengthy wing for them. that makes things happen. And then you've got, is it Matthias Tass? Sean, make sure I'm right on that.
Toss.
Matthias Tass has been an impactful player too. Like, to me, the WCC doesn't get anywhere near enough credit, and we're starting to see it get some love. But that league is a really intriguing league as conference play starts. Like, there truly is less of a gap between Gonzaga and maybe the second best team in the WCC on their best night, BYU on their best night, than there might be between Duke and the second best team in the Atlantic Coast Conference.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, you look at BYU, they're really good, but San Francisco, I mean, they're top 40 in Ken Palm. They're undefeated at the moment. I spoke to Todd Golden for my mid-major top 25 reveal this week. His team's really good. I mean, he added a lot of transfers for the front court. Ewan Masalski from San Diego, Zane Meeks from Nevada, who's only played one game, but he's going to be back pretty soon here. Patrick DePay, who on paper isn't averaging a ton of points, but he's a really good defender, so he adds a lot to the team. Gabe Stefanini, a really good guard that complements Jamari Bouye and Khalil Shabazz very well. So that's a deep team. They shoot a lot of threes. Their defense is improved. They play fast. If I wouldn't want to be matched up with that team in the NCAA tournament if they make it, because they can win a couple games. There's no question about it.
Yeah, the WCC is especially deep this season, and it'll be interesting to see how the bid situation sorts out for this league. I do think there will probably be a team or two that gets nipped from its current at-large contention status just by nature of playing in the WCC. But I think the way that the conference has performed outside of their league has been pretty admirable. And some of these away games that they've been able to secure, I thought St. Mary's performed especially well in Vegas at the Maui Invitational. That defense is for real, and I love how their bigs can shoot the basketball, and I love how their guards attack. Logan Johnson's just a ferocious competitor, and he was even asked after the title game loss to Wisconsin just about the WCC at large, and you could tell he has this sort of fire in his eyes talking about how the WCC deserves more credit. And there was a point in time where I believe there were top 5, top 6 teams in this league were a combined 26-1 to start the season. So that's a big deal when a lot of these games are bye games and they're playing away from home. So it's a mid-major conference to watch, and it speaks to our earlier conversation just about the very slim margin between high major and mid-major leagues this season.
All right, speaking of one of those mid-majors, how about the Liberty Flames tonight? 66-45, Liberty beats Missouri. Not that big of a surprise that Liberty won this game, but they won the game by 21 points. And put some respect on Richie McKay's name, okay? Liberty has now taken down 8 Power 5 opponents under him. They beat Mississippi State, if you remember, 2019 NCAA tournament. This program, though, since 2018 is 5-5 against the Southeastern Conference. Sean, your reaction to Liberty pulling off that 21-point victory and the Flames' potential as the season deepens?
I think it's a win they definitely needed because they've had some moments this year where they've struggled. They were struggling to make shots a little bit in the ASUN MAC Challenge. They lost to Manhattan and Iona. The Manhattan loss was a big-time stunner. I wasn't surprised they lost to Iona because they're both two teams that are really solid. But Liberty fell out of the mid-major top 25 the last couple of weeks. And I think one of the biggest reasons is you lost 2 really key players. Chris Parker, who was your point guard, which allowed Darius McGee to play off the ball where he was able to come off screens and be open from 3. He's been on the ball a lot more this year, so he's not able to come off screens and hit threes like that because they don't really have a true point guard if McGee's not going to be the guy. And then they lost one of their best defenders in Elijah Cuffey as just a really good wing 3-and-D guy. So he's gone. They had a lot to replace, so I think that's a big thing for them. I still think they can win a game in the tournament if they get there because Darius McGee's starting to get it going. But the ASUN is a lot better this year. You look at Jacksonville State coming in from the OVC, Eastern Kentucky coming in from the OVC. They played a tight game with West Virginia the other day. They won at Milwaukee a few weeks ago. So this is a pretty solid Eastern Kentucky team. Florida Gulf Coast looks very improved. Tavian Dunbarton, the Duquesne transfer, has looked really good. Kevin Samuel has looked solid. There's a lot of talent in the ASUN this year. It's not Liberty's league to win like it has been in past years, but I wouldn't want to face them in the NCAA tournament, that's for sure.
So Liberty wins that game by 21, and they go to 4-3 on the season. All right, it's time for tip-ins. We've got 10 minutes and change to go. Tip-ins is when we go rapid fire around the country. Your thoughts. I'm going to go to tomorrow. Eli, you're talking about 8th-ranked Kansas taking on St. John's. This game's going to be played at UBS Arena. It's a brand new building. It's where the New York Islanders play, so it's not the Garden. It's not at Carnesecca. This is at UBS Arena. You have Ochai Agbaji on one side, Julian Champagny on the other. Red Storm only has one loss, but they've struggled. They've struggled. NJIT took them to overtime. They struggled with St. Francis Brooklyn, but different game here. The fact is they've won. Now you face Kansas, a Kansas team that did lose to Dayton last week, bounced back against Iona. St. John's, Kansas, what determines the winner of this game and who wins this game?
I think St. John's has to find a way to slow down Ochai Agbaji. I think he's been capable of some pretty admirable performances this season, averaging upwards of 20 points per game. But this is a big moment for St. John's, and I think that a lot of people don't quite realize at this point how significant of a matchup this will be Friday night. If you look at St. John's non-conference schedule, with the way that this was set up, St. John's had that road matchup at Indiana, which they stormed back and weren't able to finish. But beyond tomorrow's matchup against Kansas, there isn't really much meat on the bones of this schedule. And if St. John's isn't able to upset Kansas, the likelihood is this program will end non-conference play without a KenPom top 100 win. And that's a very big deal because then you're relying on beating the likes of, say, Villanova or Marquette or Xavier, Seton Hall, some of these types of Big East games that have been a challenge for St. John's in the past. And things get dicey pretty quick. But I do think there are things that need to be ironed out. There have been some long scoring droughts and lapses for this team, despite their star power with Champagny. But I still think that this will be a pretty challenging matchup for both sides. I think St. John's just has to come out strong. They can't fall behind earlier. I think this could be a challenging matchup for them.
Yeah, to me, this is a game where Posh Alexander has to find a way to exploit the weaknesses of Remy Martin, the other side of Remy Martin. This is a game where Posh Alexander, the head of St. John's Snake, has to pressure and has to make things happen, create havoc. If you don't turn the basketball over against Mike Anderson's system and you force St. John's to do a half-court game, it could be a long night for the Red Storm. The Red Storm are not a particularly strong shooting team from the perimeter. That's why tomorrow night they're going to need Tariq Coburn and Montez Mathis to deliver something in this game. I think Joel Soriano, the Fordham transfer, is off to a pretty solid start. He went 6 for 8 last week in the win over NJIT, but he played good minutes. He looks the part. He'll guard David McCormick. McCormick's been a bit up and down here early in the season, kind of reminiscent of last year before he got going. You're right, though, Eli. Like, this comes down to St. John's ability to contain Ochai Agbaji. Because if Agbaji's getting in the open floor, not many teams are going to be able to beat Kansas. Neutralize Kansas in the half court, find a way in transition, and can they find enough perimeter shooting? You know, look, Kansas has, on any given night, Christian Braun, Mitch Lightfoot hits shots for them, comes in off the bench. He's a good shooter. Jalen Wilson, we haven't seen that really break out, actually struggled against Iona a little bit. But the point is, this is an opportunity for St. John's. This is their crown jewel. Like, you lose this game, like you said, then you go into Big East play with a lot of pressure on yourself, probably having to get 11 Big East wins out of the 20 games, if not 12. You can't just go 500 in your league. You'll be hanging by a thread unless you beat Villanova. So this is a really, really interesting game in more ways than one because Kansas has showed that they do have some vulnerability, but also because St. John's hasn't showed us enough to this point.
Yeah, and you look at Kansas, David McCormick has really struggled this year. Jalen Wilson, coming off his suspension, like you said, has really struggled this year. I think if you're St. John's, you got to obviously force turnovers because that's what Mike Anderson teams do. You want to speed up the tempo. You want to make Kansas play faster. You want to make Remy Martin play out of control. But at the same time, if you can make Kansas's front court beat you, that's what you got to do because Ochai Agbaji, Christian Braun, Remy Martin, you don't want those guys to beat you. You have to make David McCormick and Jalen Wilson beat you. And I think that's a game St. John's can win if that happens.
Eli, Purdue, Iowa tomorrow night. Rutgers, Illinois tomorrow night. Any chance that either of those visitors wins, or which visitor has a better shot?
I don't think Iowa has that much of a hopes trying to slow down this Purdue defense. I think there's just way too much scoring power.
I don't think Purdue's going to lose a game at Mackey.
It's probably true.
It's been the case. It's been the case before. And given the dynamite offense that they have this season, I think it's even more unlikely. I think Rutgers has enough to kind of to muck things up against Illinois. And as far as biggest disappointments, I'd have Illinois up in that conversation because the turnover issues are serious. It's not only concerning, but the long-term trajectory of this team changes significantly based on turnover issues. And a lot of that falls upon Andre Curbelo and the struggles that he's had this season. So I think, could this be one of those Big Ten games that finishes up in the 50s and is just a slog to get there? It wouldn't be a surprise. Rutgers played that style of basketball. Illinois played that style of basketball. I think there's going to be a need for the Scarlet Knights to defend Kofi Cockburn and not allow him to go off. But I think this could be a potential matchup that we see very low scoring, probably plenty of turnovers, and one of those matchups that could go potentially either way.
Yeah, I mean, I think Iowa probably has a better shot only because, not that I think they're going to win. I don't think that at all. But Rutgers has just been really rough this season. They've trailed at halftime in every game, I think, or maybe their most recent game against Clemson they weren't. But every game besides that, they trailed at the half, and that's like against Merrimack, Lehigh, Lafayette. A lot of games they shouldn't be trailing in at any point. Their offense has been really bad. Ron Harper Jr. looked good in the last game. Geo Baker didn't play, so let's see what if he suits up in this one. Cliff Amourier looked really good against Clemson the other day, looked much improved. But if he gets in foul trouble against Kofi Cockburn, he might go for 40 points. I mean, it's certainly possible because outside of Amourier, they have nobody that can defend Kofi Cockburn.
Saturday, looking at some of the slate here, you've got Iowa State taking on Creighton. You've got Tennessee meeting Colorado. Here's my game to watch Saturday. It is a rivalry game between Marquette and a top 25 ranked Wisconsin team. Johnny Davis, Brad Davison, the Badgers have gotten their offense going enough. We know that they defend. Meanwhile, Marquette has been perhaps one of the biggest surprises in the country. They were picked preseason 9 in the Big East. They beat Illinois. They beat West Virginia on a neutral floor. They beat Ole Miss on a neutral floor. They're off to their best start in a decade, and Havoc is truly back. So you get Daryl Morcell, who has played Wisconsin, knows what it's like to play against them. You have Tyler Kolek, who's actually the George Mason transfer, I think, has been better than anybody could have predicted. And Justin Lewis, of course, a sophomore forward. I think Marquette, Wisconsin has a chance to be a terrific, terrific game on Saturday afternoon, guys.
Even when Marquette's down, like last year, you saw what happened in that one. Justin Lewis, Micah Potter didn't block out. Yeah. Justin Lewis gets a wide open layup to win the game. I mean, even when Marquette's not good or Wisconsin's down, they're both up this year for the most part, so it should be a good game, but it's always a really good game between those two.
Yeah, I think Daryl Morcell against Johnny Davis, that's kind of strength against strength, and that's a really, really fun matchup. Just the breakout that Johnny Davis had at the Maui Invitational. He's so steady. He's so calm with the basketball. Facing an elite defender in Morcell, that's going to be a very fun individual player matchup. So this will be a really fun one to watch.
As we begin to wind down, let's do some parting shots here. From anywhere around college basketball, one thing that we didn't get in this hour that you want to bring up, a team, a player, I look at the country, and I think about a couple of things, but one thing that I hone in on is Porter Moser at Oklahoma. I wasn't sure what kind of hire if that would necessarily match up. That's a great win for them against Florida last night. And Porter Moser looked like he just looked like the right fit for the Lon Kruger post stack. Did you guys see the video post game? He's all over the student section. He's going crazy. I loved it. I think Porter Moser is not only an example of a guy who earned the power conference job, but damn, it's almost like the casual sports fan got so caught up in the Sister Jean that they forgot about the fact that Porter Moser's a really, really good freaking coach. And he does a great job of exposing your weaknesses, and he did that at Loyola. I thought he did a terrific job defending Florida last night and really making Florida uncomfortable in that game. Nice result for the Sooners in Norman. And look, another result for a Big 12 conference that expects to be deep. So my final thought is Porter Moser at Oklahoma, I'm buying. Sean.
My final thought is look at what Memphis has done the last 2 games. Lost to Iowa State as heavy favorites. Lost at Georgia as heavy favorites. And that's a Georgia team they should really be, especially without Aaron Cook playing. Next 4 games for Memphis at Ole Miss on Saturday. Then they follow that up with hosting Murray State, a team they can lose to. Murray State is loaded with talent. Tevin Brown, KJ Williams, Trey Hannibal, Carter Collins, a lot of talent there. Then they play Tennessee and Alabama. If Memphis loses all those games, that's 6 straight losses. Then we're talking about, is Memphis even an NCAA tournament team, which for the talent they have would be a complete disaster.
Yeah, no, Penny Hardaway talked about the fact they feel like an AAU team. Guess what? They do. I said on this very show last week, I think that they could be on the wrong side. And here's the thing. They can't make up for it in their conference. Their league's not good enough if they have a really bad stretch. Eli, your parting shot.
I'll give a shout out to the Mountain West Conference. I think that even despite some of San Diego State's struggles, the conference has been very strong. And we knew what Colorado State was going to bring this season. They still have yet to lose a game. They stormed back from a plus 20 deficit against Northeastern. It shows the strength that they have in storming back. But I think even some teams like Utah State with Justin Bean, he's been one of the most productive, if not the most productive player in college basketball. Wyoming has gone on the road, beaten Washington and Grand Canyon. They shoot the basketball extremely well despite the loss of Marcus Williams. And I like the depth of this league too. Even some teams like UNLV, New Mexico, even Air Force, which could have very well been the worst team in this conference, is off to a 6-1 start. That's a huge credit to Joe Scott and what he's done there. I like the depth of this conference. I don't know if it's going to translate to necessarily 3-4 bids, but I just think for the fact that when you do have a team like San Diego State that could rightfully right the ship, they have a number of players who graduate in the offseason. I think that they'll be just fine. But the fact that they haven't been on their A game and the conference has still been just fine, I think that's a really good sign for the Mountain West moving forward.
San Diego State and Michigan on Saturday. Steve Fisher Bowl happening there over in Ann Arbor. Should be a lot of fun. That does it for us. We're presented by Bet Rivers. Bet Rivers, it's the place to get all your bets in. Thanks to Rob Douster. Thanks to Eli Boettger. And thanks to Sean Paul. I'm John Fanta saying so long, everybody, and we will talk to you this weekend. The first weekend of December brings some marquee non-conference